Cooper Talk.
Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guest. I gotta tell you, people, the guy on my show today, I recently saw him. My friend Tim Grill's a huge fan, so I called my guest PR person, and I got us on the list. And I had never seen my guest in concert, and saw him at the Keswick Theater in Philly, and what a show. And what I liked about it was, you can tell he's a good guy, because he lets everybody do solos except the drummer, which I want to find out about that, which is odd to me. But he has the Trouble Is 25 is coming out December, so where he actually went and reinterpreted and re-recorded his classic album. And my guest is Kenny Wayne Shepherd. How you doing, Kenny?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. So tell me about the cars first. I saw on your website, people, you can't see it because it's audio, but he has two sweet cars. What cars are behind you?
Well, the one right directly behind me is a Dodge Viper, and the one on the other side of it is a Dodge Demon. So, pretty high-performance vehicles, yeah.
Now, does that go with the whole rock and roll the blues persona? I mean, how did you get into cars?
I've been into cars as long as, maybe even longer than guitars. I've just, when I was a kid, I had Hot Wheels cars, Matchbox cars, and every pocket in my outfit. I would draw cars in art class. I mean, I was really obsessed with cars, and even early in my career, before the first album came out, or as the first record came out, people were saying, "Well, what are you going to do if the music thing doesn't work out?" And my response was always, "I'm going to race cars." So, thankfully, the music thing worked out, and so the cars came as a result of the music, so I'm grateful for that. But I love both for sure, cars and guitars. That's pretty much my life besides my family.
Well, you at the Keswick, you had a bunch of guitars. Like, how many guitars do you own? I'm sure, and how do you decide? Okay, do you sit there and go, "I'm taking them all," or do you go, "I'm going to take 6"? I mean, what is the decision maker?
Well, I don't know how many I have. I never counted them. I know I have a lot, but I know there's plenty of guys that have more than I do. I just never felt the need to count them, to be honest with you. I mean, I guess I should probably go look at my insurance, the list on the insurance list, because, they're all insured. So, but, as far as the tour goes, it's certain guitars for certain songs. I mean, certain guitars I played on the record. I used this one on that song, so I'm going to use it live. So that's mainly the thing. Some of it's tunings. Some guitars are tuned differently than the other ones, again, for a specific song. And then, at the same time, like, some of my guitars have personalities to them. Like, they're named, like they have a specific identity. Fans love that particular guitar. They want to see it played live, So it's kind of a little bit of all of that.
Now, when did you started playing at a very young age? Tell me how you got into music, because it's unbelievable that this album is 25 years old and you're not even like 50. You know what I mean? It's fascinating. But when did you start playing? When did you pick up your first guitar?
Well, I mean, I had little toy guitars when I was like 4 years old. Little toy acoustic guitars that my grandmother would buy me that had nylon strings that made out of plastic, and I could play like Smoke on the Water, stuff like that, real simple stuff on those guitars. I got my first electric guitar at age 7. 6 months later, I got my first acoustic guitar, and then just kind of very slowly started getting different guitars, until I think I was about 12 or 13. I got my very first Stratocaster, which was a really big deal for me, because so many of my heroes played a Strat, and then, I became a professional musician not long after that, signed an endorsement deal with Fender, and that really helped when it came to acquiring guitars, for sure.
What do you think made you started young, but what made you get to that point where you became a professional musician very young? I mean, everybody talks about a garage band or people sit there and they pick up a guitar. I mean, I took Guitar Lab in high school and I sucked, and I said, I can't play. But what made you, were you a prodigy? Did you consider yourself a prodigy, or what made you so good?
I didn't consider myself anything, but other people labeled me as a prodigy, right? And so, I look back and I go, okay, maybe so. I mean, there's a lot of kids nowadays. I mean, especially with social media, it's like you can see all the stuff that you would never have been exposed to before. So like you can see all these kids all over the world that are playing instruments and watch them do their thing, and you go, wow. Like, but 25 years ago, you probably would have never seen most of those people, because it's just required so much more to get noticed back then. But yeah, I had the Prodigy label put on me, and I accepted it. I never thought much of it. I just knew that, like, I love to play guitar. I spent all of my spare time playing guitar, and it's what I love to do. And then people started paying attention to it and reacting to it, and then opportunities were coming from that, and I was just getting to, like, fulfill my dreams, like just to pick up a guitar and play it on stage and have people show up to hear it, like, was like hitting the lottery for me, and had no idea that it would turn into a career going on 30 years now.
Now, you said who are some of your guitar heroes? You mentioned that earlier. Who are some of the ones that you really idolized, and did you meet any of them?
Oh yeah, I've met most of my guitar heroes if they're still alive. I mean, it started with Billy Gibbons and Stevie Ray Vaughan and B.B. King and Muddy Waters, and a lot of blues guys primarily were my biggest heroes as far as guitar went. But I also love, I grew up listening to a lot of country music and stuff too. My dad was on country radio for a while, and so I listened to that stuff too. And there's a lot of great players that do that music and did it back then, like Willie Nelson and George Jones, and even like Hank Sr. and Hank Jr. and all of those guys. But James Brown, listening to his guitar players and that funk stuff, really learning how to play that stuff really helped me develop my rhythm guitar playing skills and stuff. But originally I was always really drawn to blues music. When I wanted to play the guitar, I wanted to play blues guitar solos.
What do you think drew you to the blues? Because a lot of young kids aren't drawn to the blues. Like, I'm 58, so the kids I know were, they're drawn to metal or drawn to Led Zeppelin. But what was it that just did you hear it and just say, that's it, that's what I want to do?
Yeah, that's kind of how it was. I don't know. I was just drawn to it. And I think it was the emotion. Like, when you play blues guitar, you're supposed to put your heart and soul into it. When somebody's doing that, I think, it makes you feel the music. And I think I felt it at a young age. Even if I couldn't relate to the lyrics, I could relate to the feeling that it made me feel when the guy was playing guitar. And I was just drawn to that.
Now, you did The Trouble Is 25 is coming out. You when I saw it was the Trouble Is tour. Tell me about the first recording of The Trouble Is, and then tell me about this new recording, because I love when musicians go back, and once again, you're 25 years older, so what you wrote then probably has changed some what you see now. But tell me about the first recording. First of all, how easy was it for you to get a record deal? You got sponsored by Fender, but did you get a record deal pretty easy?
Well, I don't know. Easy is a subjective term. I mean, some people would say, oh yeah, it happened easy for him, but like there was work that went into all of this, you know what I mean? So, the trajectory of my career was, I got my electric guitar at 7. By the time I was 13, I played on stage the first time. When I was 14, I made my first demo recordings. 15, I formed my own band and started playing live shows. Age 16, signed a record deal. Age 17, recorded my first album. That got released. First single went to number 5. The album sold 500,000 copies really fast, went on to go platinum. And then came Trouble Is, right? But there was a lot of work. That's just like, those are bullet points. But there's a lot of work that went in between all of that to get to that point. I would say it certainly was not the American Idol experience where, you go and you compete on television for however many weeks. And then the next thing you know, everybody in the whole country knows your name. It was definitely a lot more work than some of the young people are able to do nowadays and achieve success. And I don't hate them for it. It's like anybody, if you got talent, man, you got an opportunity, take it, go for it. Just put your all into it for sure. Now,
what do you think with Trouble Is? What do you think it clicked that made it so popular? I mean, and how do you deal with that? Because once again, you're a young guy. I mean, I was in college at that age, and I was, hanging out at parties and taking biology classes. But how is it? I mean, what do you think did people love it because they loved you or the music, or what do you think really made that album click?
Well, I mean, I think it's quality music, which is what I always wanted to make. I set out to make quality music, timeless music, stuff that it was real and people could resonate, not trying to be too contrived or anything like that. I wasn't trying to be a pop star, trying to make real music. So, what's interesting is you got to understand, like, all the stuff that's going on at that time. It was like, that was right around the time that, like, grunge music was coming out and taking over. And, like, hair metal was on the out, and then grunge was coming in, and there was a huge shift in genres and in the industry in general. And right around the time, you can just look historically, and I think we're probably about to go through the same thing right now. But when music becomes so saturated, like whatever the popular thing is at the time becomes so overly saturated that then it all starts to sound the same, and it all kind of runs together, and then it sounds like there's nothing unique anymore. Then that's like the precipice of, like, change. And so it's like something different is coming, but there's this window of opportunity where they're tired of what's popular, but nothing else has come along, but they want something more. They want something real to sink their teeth into, and they start looking around, and that's when they find, nowadays, that's when they would find, like, vintage rock and roll, classic rock, blues, old school country music, all the stuff that, from decades ago, because they're trying to find something real, because they're just not connecting with what's happening at the moment, and the next big thing hasn't come along. So it was right in the middle of that shift between, like, hair metal and grunge, and people were, like, trying to find some other stuff. And I think blues was on the upward trajectory for the moment, and people were looking around going, hey, what's this all about? And then, I was a young person, so young people were able to get into it, because it wasn't like some guy that looked like he could be their grandfather up there singing about how his baby done him wrong. It was like I was a young person singing, songs that hopefully I thought a lot of people could relate to, that we wrote. It was kind of just about real life stuff. But I think seeing a young person doing it made it a little more acceptable for the younger generations, my generation, into the genre as a result of that.
Now, as you're getting bigger, how do you change on stage? Because I have a background in stand-up comedy. And in the beginning, you're nervous. You're in front of 8 people, you're nervous. And then as you start getting bigger and the crowds, you're getting in front of 200, and you try to stay the same, but then you start getting nervous because it's 200, not 8 people. How is it for you? Because as your crowds are going up, and now I know you're an amazing guitarist, and you can, when you do a solo, people are all hanging on the edge. But did you fight those nerves as your career was getting bigger and bigger, and you were like, oh my God, this is a lot of people that are seeing me?
Once it got to the point where I wasn't scared to get on stage, like when I got on stage the first time I was 13 years old, I was nervous. Like I did not know I remember thinking very clearly, this is going to go one way or the other. I'm either going to, like, fail spectacularly and I'm never going to do this again, or it's going to go okay, and it'll give me some confidence to move forward. And thankfully that night went okay. And that gave me the confidence to move forward. Once I realized I could get on stage and play my instrument and not get booed off the stage, then it was kind of like took away the fear of it for me. And so it really didn't matter much the size of the crowds. Plus, the bigger the crowds, you play in front of 80,000 people. I mean, dude, there's tens of thousands of people that are so far away from you. It's like you're doing everything you can to connect with them because they're so far away. So, I don't think that the bigger the crowd, the more intimidating it is. You just get out there and do your thing. People are there to see you play, and I always wanted to get out there and just try and play my best.
Now, how did you put your band together? I mean, when I saw you, your band, everyone was stellar. You had a trumpet player who I think landed a note for like eternity. I'm like, I don't even know how this guy's breathing. But how did you pick your band, and do you change them out through the years, or how do you do that?
Well, we kind of rotate. Like, we've done a lot of different things over the years. Like, when we first started, it was like, drums, bass, keyboards, guitar, rhythm guitar, lead vocals. Then for a while there was no rhythm guitar. Then for a while there was no keyboards and no rhythm guitar, so it was just guitar, bass, drums, vocal. And then we bring the keyboard back, and then we bring a rhythm guitar player back, and then we had horns on some songs on some records, and then we'd have horns come and do a one-off show or a weekend of dates with us, and then we had horns full time. So to me, it's I kind of like mixing it up. I have found that every time I add or subtract an instrument or a personality, it changes the dynamic and it changes the approach, and it can all be a positive thing depending on how you look at it. It's like having the horn guys. We don't have the horns in the band, but when we did, it changed the way that I had to play, because you have two more people playing two more instruments, and so you got to weave around each other. So I had to play less in some instances so that I wouldn't step on those guys. But also it's kind of then when I found that when we went back to no horns, then I found myself having to carry more responsibility musically and also playing with more fire and aggression. It was almost the horn section can kind of soften things up a little bit. And so I was working harder, without them. And so it's just cool. But by constantly shifting things around, it kind of keeps you on your toes as a musician. It keeps your attention, and it keeps things from becoming just too routine. And the horn thing was interesting because for the Trouble Is tour, I had a real debate in my mind as to whether the horns should even be out on that tour. They were with us leading up to the COVID thing happening, right? And I had put them on the last studio record on every song, so we brought them out on tour for the Traveler tour. And then when we were doing the Trouble Is thing and getting ready for that, I was like, there are no horns on this record. So I wasn't sure if I was going to bring them out or not, because there was no horns on the album in the first place. And I'm going, well, we're trying to recreate this record and there aren't horns on this record. Why would we have horns on the record at the show? But then at the same time, I'm weighing, well, people haven't worked in 2 years, and let's get everybody back to work. So we brought them out, and they did first, half of the Trouble Is tour. And now we don't have the horns with us right now. But again, it's just different personnel, different instruments, coming, going, all of those things. It just really kind of shifts the dynamic of the band around. It keeps everybody on their toes and focused in different ways.
Why did you record it and re-record it? What was your process in that? Was it because you're getting older, because you've changed, or it's a hit and when you do it, you played the whole album? What was the steps to saying, okay, I'm going to, a lot of people are doing that now, and a lot of other bands, they'll do it in front of one of their hits albums in front of an orchestra. People are changing things up. What made you want to do a complete re-record of a classic album?
Well, I think that first of all, it was so that we could have this moment where we're bringing some real attention and celebrating, this achievement. I mean, 25 years of anything is a big achievement. It's a quarter century, especially when it comes to music. Quarter century of music that people are still listening to, still enjoying today, still buying tickets to show up and hear it being played. I think that's a big achievement. So re-recording it helped us draw some more attention to that. It helped us get reacquainted with the songs, because we knew we were going to go do this tour. So we had to get reacquainted with the songs anyways, because some of these songs we haven't played that much over the past 20 years. So re-recording it got us a deep dive into all the little intricate details of each song. And then also it's just good business, it's a good business case, to have another version of this record, that we can put out there and, that belongs to the artist.
Now, Ballad of a Thin Man is on this, but it wasn't on the original. Tell me the story about that, why that didn't end up on the first album, and then why you decided to bring it back now. I mean, you toured with Dylan. What was that like when you toured with Dylan?
Well, that's one of the reasons why we did a Bob Dylan song on The Trouble Is, was from being on tour with him. And he was just so good to me. And I was so young and impressionable, and he just went out of his way to be so nice and so encouraging and talk to me every single day. And he just left a huge impression on me. And so I wanted to kind of honor him by doing some of his music. So we did 2 Bob Dylan songs when we were in the studio, and Everything Is Broken is the one that ended up making it on the record but we did do Ballad of a Thin Man. It just didn't make it on the record. And so I thought it would be interesting. I'm like, well, we have to do something interesting, to re-record this album. I mean, there's two interesting things here. One is when we recorded the record, it was like, well, how close to the original do we want it to be? And what I ended up determining was, people are really married to the sound of this record. They've been listening to it for 25 years. They're likely very attached to the sound of it. So I think if you get too far away from the original, you're going to have some people are going to maybe turn their nose up to it because it doesn't sound like what they're used to hearing. So we got really close to the sound of the original, but we left some things a little bit different, and just so that when you're listening to the album, you hear little things and you go, oh wait, that's different, and you realize that you're having a new listening experience. But when you first hit play, your brain registers that's Trouble Is. It sounds familiar. That is, what record that is, and so then you realize you're having a new listening experience. The other thing was, which is interesting because I've been hanging out around a lot of sports guys lately, and you look at like people, athletes, a lot of athletes, especially in the NFL, it's like they have a window, right? And once you get to like, your early to mid 30s, it's like in the NFL, you're considered to be old, and you can't perform like you did when you were in your 20s. But I'm looking at what we do, and we are professionals in our field, right? And so I think it's really interesting that at age 45, I'm 45, Noah's, I think, in his very early 50s. And I was a teenager, and Noah was in his early 20s when we did this record. But we're middle-aged, if you will, and we're still performing at the same level, if not better than we did when we were in our teens and early 20s. And we're professionals. And so it's just interesting to draw that kind of like comparison between like professional athletes versus professional musicians, and how we're expected to, and a lot of times able to, still perform at the highest level that we were capable of when we were so much younger. So there's that. But doing the Ballad of a Thin Man track, I thought would make it interesting for people because they didn't know that song was meant to be on this record. And since they have the album, the original album, and, when they go to get this one, I wanted to give them something new, but not something unrelated. So we gave them something new that was completely related to this record. It was actually intended to be on the record, but it just didn't make the final cut for the album. And so this is a song that, that they never would have had otherwise, that was actually intended for this album. So I think it's an interesting thing to offer to the fans, and a little window into like, behind the scenes stuff that takes place.
Now you have a video out for True Lies. How do you decide? Like, what's your process of putting a video out? And I'm sure the whole game has changed in videos. I mean, back in the day, they were so expensive, and now people can shoot them on their camera. So it's great for the creative mind because you're not going, oh man, I got to spend $100,000 on a video. I can do this. Right. But what made you choose to put True Lies out?
Well, for me, if I had to look back on anything, I mean, you never know. Like you don't know in the moment because it's all new. But if you look back, if you look at like numbers, especially like streaming numbers, because that stuff didn't exist back then. So the only performance you could see was album sales, and then how many spins you were getting at radio if you decided to release a song as a single, right? And True Lies was never released as a single. And in retrospect, I think it should have been because if you look at streaming numbers, which we have now, that song has been streamed. I mean, it's unbelievable the amount of times people have listened to that song. But it's clearly a favorite of people, right? And back then, nobody thought to release it as a single at radio, but I think it probably would have performed really, really well as a single. So again, but nowadays, it's like a lot of people put out videos. It's like lyric videos are kind of the thing to do. It's not necessarily always this big elaborate music video. And, you may have you can do a multi-camera shoot with like a couple or a few cell phones now, which is like never possible. You got drones that can fly up and get these crazy shots that your kid can be flying the drone doing the footage for you or whatever. It's like, before you had to rent a crane or a helicopter. It's like so much has changed with technology. It's pretty crazy.
Now, you said there's a few differences in the the new? Give me a few examples of the differences and why you decided to do it.
A lot of it's subtle. It's like, you know, just a lick played differently, or Noah slightly singing a verse, just the phrasing is a little bit different, or maybe the melody has been just altered ever so slightly. Just little things that like you could like. What I wanted to happen is like you put the album on and it feels like your brain just registers that Trouble Is, and it feels like, you know, the record you've been listening to for 25 years, and maybe you're sitting there listening and like cleaning the house, and then all of a sudden you just hear something different, and it just grabs your attention. You're like, wait a minute, you know, I don't remember that lick being like that, or that little thing being sung like that. You know, just little nuanced details that are slightly different. Because we did two versions. We did a version where we played the songs, you know, because these songs evolve when you play them live over 25 years. And so, like, you know, the solos change and the endings change. And a lot of times, you know, the grooves change, and, you know, maybe you play it faster now, or maybe you play it slower, or maybe the drummer's doing all this stuff, and maybe I'm doing, you know. So we did that. We did the album Faithful version, and we did like the Evolution version. But the more I listened to it, I'm like, I felt like the most appropriate way to go was to not alienate the character of the original recording, because that's what people fell in love with. And if you go too far from that, they go, oh gosh, like, it's almost like maybe you just ruined the original, because like the vibe is so different that it's not what they're used to hearing. It's not what they want to hear. So we decided to kind of recreate the vibe of the original.
How has your writing style changed over the years? Because once again, when you're 18, and now you say you're 45, you know, so it's your middle age, as you say. You know, I call you a young buck. How's your writing style changed over the years? Have you really evolved? Are you happy which way it has evolved?
Well, I think it's just grown, you know, like the more you do it, it's like a muscle. It's like the more you do it, you know, the stronger it is. But ultimately, the approach has always been the same. We just try not to write songs that are over people's heads. We try not to write songs that are too gimmicky. We try just to write about real life, real experiences, you know, keep it simple and direct, have good choruses, have melodies, write stuff that people want to sing along with. Hopefully it'll stick in your head, you know, but just surround myself with people that I believe are even better writers than I am. It's kind of like playing with musicians that are better than you. It's like, it can do nothing but make you look and sound better than you are, you know, and it can inspire you to be better. So that's what I try and do.
You had mentioned COVID earlier. What was it like when you found out you would have to get off the road? Because once again, it's in your blood. You're a musician. That's what you do. You're used to that. What did you sit there and use it creatively? Did you spend more time with your family? Did you sit there and go, well, wait, what am I going to do now? You know, I don't like gardening. I'm used to being on the road. I mean, what was your reaction to it? And did you think it would last as long as it did?
I don't think anybody knew that it would last as long as it did. It was literally a week by week, a month by month waiting process. We're in a holding pattern. You know, everybody had tours booked. Everybody had tours canceled. Everybody had tours rescheduled over and over and over again. And just when you thought maybe we're going to turn the corner, then we didn't, and we had to reschedule. And so for me, I got to say, I mean, I have a family. I have children. My wife and I have a big family. It's the biggest break that I've ever had from music in my entire life. And really, man, it was actually on one hand, it was a real blessing, because I got to spend some really great time with my wife and my kids, and got to do things with them that probably wouldn't have happened otherwise, because I would have been working. So it was like a curse and a blessing all at the same time. It was a really rough patch for a lot of people, for all of us, really. I mean, it was just like, who saw that coming, you know? And it's still having ripple effects, without a doubt. But I always try and like be optimistic, or as optimistic as I can, and make the best out of any situation. I think that we did, as far as our family goes, and as far as, you know, the career went. Thankfully, we were able to come back and hit the road. And this year it's been a celebration. It's been a celebration of the return of live music performance, and it's been a celebration of the 25th anniversary of my second album.
What was it like your first night back on stage? Because I got to tell you, I was blown away. The crowds were just, all the shows I've gone through since then. But what was it like that first night you went back and you went, is it just, it's like, baby, I'm back. Like you just walk on stage and you just knew the roof was going to blow off.
No, because it was so weird. It wasn't like that. I don't think it was like that for anybody because it wasn't back to normal, right? When people first started getting back to work, it was not back to normal. Like it's just now getting back to normal, or whatever you want to call normal, right? But like there was still people that were scared to show up and be in large crowds. So you'd have a sold out show and you might have 20% of the seats empty because, I don't know, those people didn't want to be in a big crowd, or they didn't want to have to prove they were vaccinated, or they didn't want to have to wear a mask, or the worst scenario happened. Maybe they passed away during, you know what I mean? It's like, it was weird. And then there was all these rules and protocols and things like that backstage and at the venue that had never existed before. So no, it wasn't like, let's just get out there and rock the house and it's going to be awesome, because it was like, everything was like so weird and so different. It was a real adjustment, to be honest with you. But then as it went on and as things started to get better and people started to get more comfortable with the situation, and now things are really starting to resemble some sort of normalcy of what was the pre-pandemic experience of going to concerts, with being able to just buy tickets, show up and enjoy a show. Yes, then now it's like, whenever you started to turn that corner, then it really became like these people, everybody's so hungry for music. The artists are hungry to play it, and the fans were hungry to enjoy it. And not to say people weren't fired up, but just walking in the venue like, nothing had ever happened. It wasn't the situation at all.
When you play live, how do you decide when you're going to do a guitar solo? And you change it up because, first of all, guitar solo must be so empowering because everybody's just watching you and going, oh, wow. But how do you do the guitar solo? Do you change them every night? Do you sit there and just go on a riff when your mind goes, wow, I want to take it this way? How does a guitar legend do a guitar solo?
Well, for me, it's different for everybody, I think. For me, I just, obviously there's a roadmap there. You have the album version of the song and the solo you decided to put on the record. And that becomes kind of the template for the solo. But, some songs evolve. Like there's certain songs that maybe started off as a 4-minute long song on the record, but now it's turned into an extended jam situation. So you have the template, but then there's all this, maybe 4 minutes turns into 9.5 minutes, and so what are you going to do? How do you add that other 5.5 minutes worth of music? Well, that's all improvisation. That's where you take all kinds of liberties, man. You just see where the music takes you. So, you start with that, with your boundaries and your template, and then, you just find opportunities to maybe steer it in this direction or that direction and see what happens. And it's trial and error. We're experimenting on the spot in the concerts. People show up and they don't realize it, but we're trying new things every night, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and we just have to try it to find out.
Where do you find it in your heart to let everyone else do solos? I have a friend who's in a very big band and he's a drummer and he's never even been asked to do a solo, and you're used to it, but you're all your guys do solos. Was that just something how you grew up and you said, I want everyone to do it? Or because it's very big hearted to you, because people expect your solo and then they get blown away by all these other solos too.
Right. Well, here's the thing. Like, yeah, I'm a guitar player, right? And even I get tired of hearing nonstop guitar solos. Like at a certain point, it's like at some point, it's a breath of fresh air to hear another guy take a solo instead of just guitar all night long. And I think that's just being, a musical person. Like I appreciate the musicality of other people and other instruments. And so, and also it's like, I try and hire, really talented individuals, like people who are really great at what they do. And I think they deserve a moment to shine as well. As far as the drummer goes, Chris, he prefers not to play a drum solo. I've actually found that like most of the drummers that I've played with, if given the option to play a drum solo, at least in my band, they don't want to do it. They choose not to do it. And I don't think it's like, I don't think they're intimidated. I just think that they're just humble players, and they feel like, you know, they're there to drive the train, you know, to be the engine, you know, that takes us all down the path, you know, and not necessarily trying to be flashy and be in the spotlight, you know. It's not because they can't do it. I just think that, you know, they're just humble musicians, and they don't want to be that guy.
One final question. What is the future for you? Are you creating new music? I mean, you have this tour. I mean, what do you plan in the next few years? What are you going to give us? What are you going to bring us? Are you going to keep inspiring us?
Oh, yeah, we got a lot coming. I mean, you know, the 25th anniversary of Trouble is bringing a new version of the album. It's bringing a documentary film on the making of the Trouble Is original record. It's also bringing a live DVD concert from the very first show of the tour in my hometown in Shreveport, Louisiana. So just those three. Oh, and the very first ever vinyl version of Trouble Is, right? So those four things right there are big, just surrounding the Trouble Is anniversary. But we have a whole new record that we recorded in February of 2020, right before the whole world shut down. And I've been sitting on that record the whole time because I did not want to release an album during a time when we couldn't go out and play the songs for the people. So we have a whole new record that's just waiting to be released of all new material that'll probably come out sometime next year as well. And then we were just in the studio again, doing some recording last week or week before last, that will probably be for a record that'll come out, you know, a year and a half or 2 years from now. So there's lots of stuff coming down the line for the fans, and a lot of stuff to keep us busy.
Well, that's awesome. I want to thank you for coming on. People, go to KennyWayneShepherd.net, and if you get a chance when he's in your town, go, because the concert will blow your socks off. I loved it. I was at the Keswick, and the Keswick has the most uncomfortable seats, but we didn't think about them because they were on stage. So people, go check them out. I'll go to my website, CooperTalk.net. You can find over 930 episodes. Email me, Cooper at CooperTalk.net. And also, you can find me on Twitter at CooperTalk. So remember, I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guests. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I'll talk to you next time.